watch with me. It's on YouTube. It's German. I'm gonna translate it. So this is about Johannes Dürr. He's a very good cross-country skier. He got tested positive, so he also admitted that he did doping. He talks to German TV and tells the entire story. There's one line I want you to pay attention to, which is the line for me that makes the difference. Watch that. So they have a new coach who's extremely harsh on them. He fights. And he gives up. Not because he wants to. His body is in rebellion. It's too much. The training is too much for him. Nothing goes anymore. Sees a lot of doctors, physiologically at his end. Psychologically, he has to make a decision in his career. Which way to go? So what is he supposed to do? For me, what's the question then, he says? Do you really have to train this crazy in order to be on top of the world? And how can you cope with these loads without doping? And his answer is, it is not possible without doping. And this is the question I'm trying to answer. Is doping necessary or not? They got a new coach. The new coach did what most coaches do when they're only having a short contract. They burn athletes. And the ones who survive maybe make it. I want to talk about doping today. The truth, in my opinion. So first up, we have to understand whose interest it is. If you are coach and you work for different countries and you only get short-term contracts, which means your contract is max one Olympic cycle of 4 years. And you have to do everything to make sure that within this Olympic cycle you create as much success as possible that is attributed to you. Now, any success that comes after your work is probably not going to be put in correlation with your work, although it certainly is an effect. The way judgment usually works is that only the success that happens during your period of work as a coach is put in correlation. The classic way to do it is to put the intensities up and to put the volume up and to basically burn athletes. This is absolutely wrong if you want to build up athletes on a long-term basis. But again, long-term is not the goal. And now comes the big tragedy of this story. A coach, and coaches get fired so quickly today, be it soccer, be it rowing, be it any other sport. You know, coaches get basically short-term contracts. They have to perform immediately, but nothing works immediately. Nothing, absolutely zero, nothing. If you plant a tree today, you better have between 4 years minimum or 200 years before you actually have a massive tree. It's pretty similar in sport. I mean, not 200 years, obviously, but you need at least 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years to build something up. Now, the problem is that the funding system in most countries actually is short-term based. The more success you have, the more money you get. Well, of course, coaches are hired to create immediate success because then immediate money is available. It's very simple. What coaches do, if they, there's a high performance team, so the coach comes in and say, okay, volume up, intensities up. Of course, athletes will be burned. It's simply too much load. This is not how you build up athletes, but this is how you create short-term success. On the other hand side, interestingly, and there's another side to this doping story, training is not as professional as we think it is. We think of all these, I'm talking about sports in general. We think about all these high-performance sports teams and they have such a well-structured plan. No. I know barely any athlete who has a plan for almost every single day of the year. I don't know him. I don't know. My athletes have that. I know a few other coaches who do the same thing. But I was stunned to see that this is not standard. Well, of course, if you basically leave your athletes alone during off season, just do this, do that, what's going to happen? The preparation is not an optimum. So now the training planning is not as professional as it can be. You don't give athletes enough time to build up, which would create a higher peak. So you pump up the intensities, you pump up the volume, you basically try to overheat the athletes and hope that it's just about enough. Now this is almost impossible to endure, and this is what Johannes Stewart just said. Johannes Stewart started out as a highly talented cross-country skier. And then he got into this training regime and training routine of coaches who were hired on a short-term basis only. And he was burned, like 99% of all the other athletes. And the problem with this is, and he rightfully asked the question, he says, is it really necessary to train this in such a way in order to be, the best in the world? Hey guys, welcome. I'm just editing this video, as you can see, and I think there are more details I should talk about. So I made myself a list, and I want to talk about a couple of things in order, because we got to see the big picture here. I don't want to talk about what doping is and so on. I expected you know that. You go to WADA.com, WADA.com, and this the World Anti-Doping Agency. I want to talk about the background of doping. Why do people doping, and is it effective? Is it really necessary? So first up, we have to understand that doping always correlates with money in terms of funding. Most coaches are hired on a short-term basis. They have to perform within 1-2 years. It's not like they have 4, 5, 6, 7 years time to develop somebody. But this is needed, especially, the higher the level gets, the more time you need. It's very simple. Now, coaches are hired short-term, which means they need to generate success within a very, very short time. If they don't do that, they're considered to be a bad coach, and therefore they get fired. So naturally, coaches do everything to create success that is quickly put in correlation with their presence. So the best way to do this, and I heard this once, there was during a coach's education, a judo coach said, the way you do it, you increase the volume, you increase the intensities, you will lose quite a few athletes on the way, but the ones who make it are going to be good. They're not going to be at their absolute personal peak, but they're going to be very good. But after 2 years, 3 years, the latest, you have to go, because then they will see a pretty massive breakdown. So you can't stay too long. I mean, this is pretty insane, and this is not an exception. Okay, so as coaches are hired short term, and they have to train athletes in a way that is actually destructive in order to communicate, I'm worth my money. Athletes are basically prevented from developing naturally to a certain point. Now, this overtraining leads to the point that, just like Johannes Stewart said, is it really necessary to train this crazy? Yeah, it is, because your coach will not be here that long, and you have to show visible success, so he basically has to burn you. Therefore, athletes turn to doping, because doping makes you basically forget about your overtraining physically. I don't think that doping has such a huge physical effect. I think it's overestimated what it does. It's more like a placebo. If you had a fully integrated 365 day a year training plan, always a monitoring coach on your side, like I talked about in this video there, the problem would be less. But it's not the case. As an athlete, you're also funded short term. If you don't show results within a short period of time, you're fired. And you have to make a living with your sport now. And sports like rowing, there's not a lot of money in there. I mean, doping in rowing is not such a big issue. But there are other sports where there's way more money in it. So of course you will do everything to get that money. And if it means destroying your body, in order to forget that overtraining, which your coach does with you, because he's also funded short term. Now the question is, why is there short term funding only? Guys, it's you, it's me, it's all of us. If we don't see immediate success with a coach, what do we think? Pooh, not good athletes. Change the athletes. Oh, not a good coach. Oh, there's a problem with the performance. The mentality is not right. Let's get somebody else. Gone. We expect that. Now, in between, between us and the coach and athlete are two links. Either a sponsor and or the government through, donation programs. So they basically give you money if you if you create success. There is no program that says, oh, you're a top athlete, great, you have 6 years, I'm going to pay every year like, I don't know, €1 million or dollars in order to see you perform in 6 years. But this is the reality in sports. So as governments and sponsors expect quick success, coaches are only hired on a short-term basis. And if a coach is hired on a long-term basis, you bet that if there's no success within 2 years, gone. No, didn't fulfill his contract. So this is what leads to doping. Very simple. And we don't have to be that astounded. Say, how could you do doping? And this is what always ticks me off when I see these videos, like the one with Johannes Dürr. There's a TV station daring to say and daring to be like God or the judge and say, you are a bad person, you are a criminal. How do you feel as a criminal? Idiots, you were the ones who pushed, huge success, great, a new sensation. Nobody asked, where does it come from? Is this even possible to have such a steep improvement curve within such a short period of time? We have to understand that doping is actually a byproduct of this entire short-term thinking process. This really is the problem. Now, my personal view on doping. My attitude is that doping is not just cheating. This is the smallest part of this entire story. The greatest part is that it ruins your body. It's not necessary. You could actually forget about doping if you had a 365-day-a-year training plan that monitors athletes, that actually has a highly individualized build-up and development plan. If this were given, you're safe. You don't need doping. Because doping, interestingly, I was astounded to see that doping is mostly done where there's unprofessional training. And with unprofessional, I mean there is no off-season coaching. Well, what do you mean? Off-season's off-season. During off-season, of course, you shouldn't think about, let's say, rowing, cycling, whatever you do. But you should have a pretty structured plan of which elements to do, because even the off-season is part of the preparation for your peak of season. You can't be an athlete 9 months a year and 3 months a year you're not. Doesn't work. Either you are an athlete or you're not. So during off season, you gotta use certain recovery techniques. You gotta do something completely different, but is actually beneficial for your peak of season. But this is not the case in all sports. This is even not the case with many coaches. I see it with a couple teams I know pretty well. Off season, you're left alone. You can do whatever you want. But then during preparation, I'm gonna burn you. That's idiotic. It's really unprofessional. Well, of course you have to overheat athletes, and then they help themselves a bit with doping. And personally, I really don't think that a coach doesn't know when his athlete does doping. You can tell. Either, and this is one of the doctors said in this video as well, either you are a very bad coach or you're a liar. There are only these two options. You know when your athlete does doping. Right? There's no other way. Unless you're somebody who works remotely with somebody, okay, you can't really see that. But all the rest, you can tell. Very few people know that I've never been drunk my entire life. I simply don't think it makes sense. And knowing this, you probably know my view on doping. Doping has always been a no-go for me. So either I make it without doping or I don't make it at all. It's very simple, because there's a life after rowing. But most rowers are built this way because they have university and there are interesting things going on outside of rowing. As I've never been drunk my entire life, never have smoked one single cigarette my entire life, never have smoked weed, taken any drugs, I have the same view on doping. Talking about alcohol, if you get drunk, it takes about 2 weeks before the alcohol is out of your system. Although you might feel good 3 days after, you're not fine. And it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to be on the same level again where you were before you got drunk. And you say, hey, some people become world champion and Olympic champions and still get drunk. Okay, where could they be without getting drunk? That's the interesting thing. You're not competing against somebody else, you're competing against what you could be. That's the thinking I'm looking for. I know. Recently, a guy contacted me from the US high school rower and said, I'm beating everybody on the erg. I lost my motivation. What should I do? Compete against what you could be. Have you seen a world best time in the erg? Do that, Set your bar a bit higher. Same with marijuana. I know people who smoke marijuana and say, hey, why do you smoke that? And they say, well, I do it for relaxation. Really? Really? If you need to smoke weed to relax, you haven't worked before. That's simple. Oh, what do you say? I work all day. No, really not. If you're serious about what you do, you don't even touch weed. I'm not talking about heroin, cocaine, all the other stuff. No, absolutely not. Nobody needs to smoke weed. Absolutely nobody. So I can say anybody who takes drugs is simply an idiot. I know I will get a lot of bashing for this, but anybody who gets drunk, not serious, not a serious athlete. Period. Yeah. I'm way more successful than you have ever been, Aram. Yeah, congratulations. There are many athletes who are way more successful than I've ever been as an athlete. But the question is, are you as successful as you could be or not? You're not competing against me. You're competing against your potential. Same with smoking weed. If you smoke weed, you lost control. It's that simple. Get to work. Do something where you feel like, whoa, I'm afraid like hell and this is the right thing to do. I'm going to work my ass off all day and then I'm going to have it. And you will fail and you will cry tears and you stand up and try again, fail again. You don't need marijuana if you do that. No, you don't need that. You don't need to get drunk. There's no time. When I was 16, 17, 18, 19, also I loved to go to clubs and dance because I loved, I used to DJ a bit, and I just loved house music, certain type of vocal house music, just loved it. My best friend and I we drank, I think, mineral water, sometimes Coca-Cola. That's it. Bars didn't make any money with us. We came there for the music, for dancing. We took off, got some sleep, recovered, fine. That's. I'm not saying don't go out, and I'm not saying don't drink any alcohol. Drink alcohol. I love to drink a glass of red wine maybe a couple times a year. That's it. Just to enjoy. I don't like beer personally. I don't think beer is that healthy, but it's just my personal standpoint. So, as you know now my standpoint, you probably now understand what my view on doping is. And there's another side effect about doping. Most doping actually happens in amateur sports. A doctor I know told me a story about one of his patients. The doctor got a call from a father, says, my son is 16, he was at the gym, he's been working out at the gym for 2 years now, he has a lot of muscles, but now his skin breaks. And the doctor said, ooh, come see me. So, the son was 16, was too small for his age, the father was a pretty tall guy, and they found out that when he was 14, wanted to go to the gym, wanted to build up muscles. And everybody knows between the age of 12 and 22, most boys have their majority push. So when certain natural hormones start to develop, and you can't really accelerate it. It simply comes at its time. But this guy at the age of 14 wanted to have it quicker. So what he did was talk to one of the guys and said, hey, I'm trying to build up muscles, doesn't work. And the guy said, yeah, I know, you need calcium. Oh really? Yeah, calcium. I have the best calcium in the world. All the pros are using it. So sold him some pills, and for 6 months this 14-year-old premature boy got muscles like an adult. After 6 months the effect leveled out. Like with anything you do and take, and the body always compensates. You always need to do more and more and more. So then he went back to that guy like after 8 to 10 months and said, I don't know, keep on pushing, it doesn't work. And the guy said, yeah, you need vitamins, but certain ones. You need to inject them with a needle. And the boy said, yeah, of course, if that's what it takes, I do it. So he showed him how to inject it, and it was steroids for a man with 250 kilos. This is what this then 15-year-old boy took. And after 2 years, the skin started to break, his testicles were the size of peas. The entire natural hormone cycle was dead. You couldn't reactivate it anymore. and massive heart problems, huge problems overall, and he stopped growing. So there was this 16-year-old cripple that was in this doctor's office, and his life was basically wasted. It was gone. And there's nothing they could do anymore. The father, who was quite wealthy, traveled to a specialist in the US, nothing they could do. That's one of the side effects of doping. And I'm not telling you that story to scare you, it's just a fact. Doping is usually taken if things are not prepared professionally. That's the entire moral of the story. Right? And you can't really force things. You can't really say, okay, I want to develop quicker. Things take time. It's that simple. If you see a tree grow, give it a couple of years. You know, there are even trees who won't grow fast in the first 10 to 15 years. It's that simple. So to sum up this video, let's recap the facts real quick. Doping is not needed. If you have a 365 professional monitoring plan, I don't think it's needed. If you have time to develop, it's not needed. The reason why doping is done is that athletes are under pressure by their coaches, who are hired on a short term, because they need to show success in a short period of time, because they have short-term funding only, because the government or the sponsors want to show the audience that their team is successful. Success in sports, guys, is a political issue today. So if we, the audience, were more patient and say, okay, an athlete needs 4, 5, 6 years before you can see first results, even on top levels, then things will, in the long term, become a bit different. But everybody plays a role. The athlete, who is not brave enough to say, screw you, I don't do doping, and if I have to change my life, I change my life. Get different funding, stop the sport. I think this is a decision athletes should make. Coaches should say, okay, to whoever funds them, say, guys, I looked at the athletes, they need about 4 years. You cannot expect any success within 3 years. And if the sponsor who hires them, the employer, says, all right, then you're not a good coach because you can't generate quick success, and say, no, I'm a professional coach and I'm not going to burn athletes. You know, this is the decision coaches should make. And if it means getting a different job, but I think we have to keep the moral high. We have to follow our ideals. We always talk about sport as something idealistic and brave and da. If you say A, you got to see B too. No. Sponsors. If you sponsor somebody, or government agencies, you got to be aware that you have a huge development pool, and these athletes, you got to give them at least 4 years to develop, at least. Don't expect results. Don't expect first early results. Expect development, monitor development. And I did a video on how to monitor development of athletes and how to avoid overtraining. But don't expect medals or something like this. Take your time. You know, this is how we create healthy sport. And we, the audience, give athletes time. Appreciate that they're doing their best. Appreciate that it takes time. Okay, guys, I want to leave it here. Pretty controversial issue. I'm well aware of this, but these are the facts from my personal point of view. Good. I wish you a very good day, guys. And if you think this video is interesting for somebody else, share it. And I'm looking forward to your comments. If you want to work with me, it's info@rmtraining.com. And for the rest, very good day. Bye-bye. So, if you there smokes weed, I mean, what's wrong with you? I hate that smell. Why do people have to smoke weed? If you need weed to relax, go get to work. Then you're tired enough that you will relax by yourself. If you need substances to feel relaxed, then you haven't worked enough. That's just my attitude. But maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned. So anyway, getting back to the point. Now my entire car stinks. Oh.